Okay. The Visiting Artist Program, funded by PAFA's graduate program, brings an outstanding roster of local, national, international artists to PAFA each semester for lectures, critiques, and workshops. The program exposes students to the public the program exposes students to the public to a range of artistic approaches and fosters discussion about contemporary art and ideas. This afternoon, we are pleased to have Shona McAndrew joining us. Shona McAndrew, born in 1990, was born in Paris and lives and works in Philadelphia. She holds an MFA in painting from Rhode Island School of Design in 2016 and a BA in Psych and Painting from Brandeis University in 2012. She had a solo sculpture installation at Art Omi, inGhent, New York, 2021, a solo show of life sculptures at Abroms-Engel Institute for the Visual Arts at UAB Birmingham, which traveled from Moore College of Art and Design in Philadelphia from 2020. Previous solo exhibitions also include Chart New York from 2019 and 2021 and Spring Break Art Show in New York in 2019. And she is currently represented by Chart in New York. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to Shona McAndrew. You may now begin sharing your screen.
Hello, everyone. Okay, I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna do it well. Share and play. Boop, it worked. Fantastic. Hi, everyone. I wish I could move my camera so you can see my dog's laying on my lap. So, who's also named Lily. So I have my own Lily here. I'm gonna try to move. Can't see my, okay, that's fine. I try to make this talk a bit more oriented towards students and like my experience being a student, especially in grad school. I really enjoyed my time at RISD and it felt very critical to who I am now. I feel like without it, I wouldn't have been able to do a lot of what I'm doing now. So very thankful for that time and the questions that helped me both ask and answer. So I have 80 slides and I have 45 minutes to do it. So I'm gonna try to be efficient and go through them. So you can look at them and later on I can go back, but it turns out I've made a lot of work. I didn't know, but now I know. So these are the watercolors I made right before grad school. It's what I applied to RISD with. And it all started with a professor who asked me to put something up on the wall that I cared for and to paint it because I knew I liked to paint, but that was the end of that. I didn't understand what I wanted to paint or why. And so when you have those moments when you're not sure why, I think doing that one assignment, paint something you love, really helps. It kind of helped me recalibrate and it taught me to look. That was the first time people were looking at my work with me and I'm not gonna say impressed, but were excited to see what I could do more with this. And so did I. And that eye is what I think still exists in my work today. And it came from these types of assignments. And me thinking about what dresses are, what is a portrait when there's no people on it. These are my dresses and people reading into it. They're like, that dress is bigger than the chair. It must mean, and in reality, I just painted the chair too small, but I understood what one can read into objects and their relationship with the people, both who own them and the one who's painting them. That also comes into my practice later on. And this is one of my first portrait. This is also watercolor. It's of Cassandra. And you start seeing this kind of confrontational gaze. That is something I worked through grad school that I only start seeing in these first paintings and that I wasn't very happy with. As many of you know, I'm sure, painting women is quite a sensitive subject. I mildly joke that art history is the porn of history. If anyone wanted to see a naked woman, they would commission a painting. So to add to that history, you have to be, in my opinion, quite careful that you're not playing the same games of just offering beautiful images of women to people who buy art, who unfortunately still is mainly men. So that was something that was starting to sit in me, not the thought of selling my work. At that point, it's only recently have I been selling my work. At this point, I was my biggest collector. I owned everything I made. So this was just really, what does it mean for someone to look at work like this? And I think this is a perfect example of when I was really doing things wrong. And this was Tess Holiday, who I painted later on, and I worked with her, and I can see the progress of when I took a picture from her Instagram and drew it life size. And from when I painted her only last year, and the relationship I had with her when I painted her and got her to send me a picture, and it was about back and forth. And here it's so much about us looking at her body and her looking at us, inviting us in to look at her, which was a lot of the issue. Like, she's inviting us to look at her body in a very specific way that I didn't want, and I didn't understand how to fight it or to work around it. Again, another one of these paintings where there is intimacy, but that gaze is inviting you into looking at their bodies. And I really, really dislike that. I also added these paintings because I did not finish a single painting all throughout grad school. I tried my hardest, and I just didn't understand how to complete an image or how to finish a body. How much detail am I supposed to put in? Like, what is right? I mean, I just didn't know at all what to do. And I'm a fast painter. You should know that I painted practically that whole painting the day before my crit, and it's life size. When you put some fire under my butt, I apparently can paint real fast. But yeah, so this kind of problem is what followed me all throughout my first year of grad school. Why am I painting women, and what does Shona have to offer? And that's a question that I think is really important for an artist, is why? Why does it matter that I'm doing this? And why does it matter that Shona, with my very specific experience being a woman and looking at women, what does it matter that I'm painting a woman? You know, and I was born and raised in Paris. I like to joke that my father said he knew I was his baby because I was the fattest baby in the hospital. So I was the fattest baby person, and it's since I was born, I was the fattest person in every room. And I always saw women as like aliens compared to me. I didn't think we were the same thing. I can't be a woman if women look like this. They're all so beautiful. And so a lot of me looking at women is almost as an observer, not as participating in womanhood. So why does that specific view matter, and how do I paint that? Again, a perfect example of a wildly unfinished painting where this is my friend Alina, and she's just fully presenting herself to the viewer. She's so exposed, and we're looking down at her, so it feels very oppressive, I find. And I could tell when I was painting it, I just did not know how to work through it. And then this painting happened. The painting is actually straight. I don't know how I edited this in 2015. It's the only picture I have of it. It's wildly curved, but I did stretch it right. And I had a crit where my professors walked in and said, wow, what a catalog of women. I was like, oh, a catalog. Like, that's certainly not what I want. I don't want it to look like I'm just offering different ways of looking at women. And this painting felt like a big moment where I just hated it. I hated every moment of it. I hated painting it. I don't like the color green, and it was very green. And I think that's when a big block in me happened, or a big something happened in me. That's when that's the beginning of my turn to sculpture, because painting was just not working for me. It doesn't matter how much I love painting or how many nice moments were in this painting. I just clearly was not headed in the right direction. And I started making collages of my own body. Here you can see, that's just me. I cut it out and stuck in a piece of paper and painted into it. And I think using myself, those were the first naked pictures I ever took of myself. And it's the first time I showed my body really in public this way. I think that helped me figure out a bit more how I wanted to present women's bodies, because it was mine and I understood how I wanted to be seen. I think that's something that comes into my practice today, where I talk with my models, how do you want to be seen and how will I paint you? And that's something that really started when I stopped painting other women and just looked at my own body. And I was able to be a bit funny. I think it's a bit of a, sorry, my cat is twirling around my foot trying to get attention. Yeah, they're a bit funny and there's a bit of power to it. My mother always used to call me monumental. I took great offense to that, because is she saying I'm fat? which I am, but that's not what she was saying. She was talking about the power or space I take up in the room and how I held myself. And I saw it suddenly as something much more empowering to be monumental. And how do I make that into my work as well? So these are digital collages that lead to one of my first sculptures. I was thinking a lot about Matisse and his Odalisques, which are paintings I grew up looking at when I was in France. And these women who are sitting in a chair and are looking at the painter, and they're fully exposed and they're quite clearly there to be looked at and painted. And how do I take that for myself and make it into something I can use in my own practice as a woman? What is, this is the first time it comes up, but the female gaze, what does it mean to have a female gaze versus a male gaze? Again here, I don't know how I have two left feet or two right feet. I don't know, that foot in the bottom is completely messed up and I can't explain it. Yeah, and so it led to my thesis work for my graduate school, for my MFA. And these are one of the 3 sculptures I made. And what I liked so much about this sculpture was the space it took up in a room. And I think that was very different from when I was painting. Paintings are up on a wall, and the confrontation was much more with the eyes. And I was thinking, I want a different kind of, not so much confrontation, but I want people to feel these bodies and these women in a very visceral way. And that's exactly what these sculptures did. People have to walk around them. Even if they didn't want to look at a fat body, they still had to acknowledge its presence in a room. And then, people want to see what's underneath. They crawl underneath to see the moles, to see all the bits and pieces of a woman that makes them so interesting. My mother, who is in the audience right now, one of my favorite things about her is the moles on her back. They're so subtle and small, but they're so womanly, and I love them, and they make me think of her. And so to carry that through into everyone's bodies, I can see, if you can, right underneath the hand, I can see a tiny little mole that's sticking out. And these little moments that are very exciting. And that was I was starting to understand what it meant for me to portray a woman. I wanted you to care about the moles. And I remember I had a crit at grad school where one of my professors was like, I don't care what your sculpture is doing. I just care about the moles. And she said that in a critical way. She thought that was like, in her eyes, that was her critiquing my work. But I was like, oh my God, that's exactly what I want. I know you think you're saying that. I mean, she meant that in a good way. She just was being helpful. But it actually helped me realize that's actually what I want. I want you to care about the moles. And I don't want you to really care about what they're doing. Yeah, same with this big lady, Charlotte. This is not how good she looked in my MFA. I've redone her 2 times since. She has gotten multiple makeovers. But same thing with Charlotte. She just stands very proud. She's 72 inches tall, so she's taller than most people. And she just takes up so much room, and she's so clearly strong, and she's confrontational only in her confidence and her desire to be there, and not by staring straight at you in a painting and inviting you to look at her. I like that we're in her space. She's not in our space, and she's not inviting us in. We're being allowed, I don't know. She's not inviting us in. That was the big one. Here you can see me standing at my RISD graduate thesis with my 3 ladies. Sophia down here is the one who's sitting on the floor. She's waxing, and she's the one that the professor said, I don't care that she's waxing. I just see her moles. And then my 2 other ladies and me standing there in between. And that was, it was a very exciting experience. One, setting them up and having everyone think I was one of the sculptors. So if I moved, people would freak out because I thought you were a sculptor. To people just being freaked out by my sculptures, thinking that they're real women. I just love that back and forth. I love these visceral, real emotions people had. And the number of women who came up to me saying that sculpture standing up with her leg up, did you see, that was me last night coming out the shower. And I started feeling that women were coming to me with this like excitement because they did the same. And it was really honest moments of being a woman, because being a woman is being a person. There's no one way of being a woman. And that was something I was trying to understand. Being a chubby girl in Paris is not easy because appearance is very important everywhere, but especially in Paris. And so I didn't understand what it meant for me to be a woman. And so seeing women understand me and understand my experience with womanhood in a way made me feel more like myself. And I could see that was happening with other people as well. And so I started making these little sculptures right out of grad school, which I know many of you are in grad school. And it is hard to make work when you're out of grad school. You know, you certainly don't get the time and the space to do it. You have to get a job, which I did. I was a full-time manager at the Philadelphia Magic Gardens and assistant manager. And I worked 5 days a week, and the 2 days I wasn't working at the job, I painted and I went to my studio, or I went to my studio after work, and it was completely exhausting and nothing like grad school, which is so full of indulgence. I mean, you can make art as long as you want and as much as you want, and that's just not something you always get. So I was trying to think, how do I make these sculptures and create this presence, but in a very different way? And that's when I start thinking of them as dolls and something very precious, which is not how I was told to think of a fat body, as something precious. And I remember making this sculpture here, which is like one of the only pictures I took of her. I clearly was not very good at, I didn't know how to photograph sculptures. She fit in my arms like an infant. It was like a perfect infant size. And I loved dolls and I loved toys as a kid. And I had that same love for her that I did with toys or my dolls, which I just love that she was this chunky lady with her belly rolls. And in this, you can't really tell, but there's a little mirror on the other side of that Hello Kitty, and her eyes do look straight at it. So in my eyes, she was looking at her vagina. And at that time, I was just starting my serious relationship with my boyfriend. You may have seen run up and downstairs, turn off my fan. And so I was confronting really truly myself as a sexual being, or as a being that I'm sharing my body with someone else. So I think I was very interested in women looking at themselves, which is something I always thought about. You know, women spend so much money and time waxing their vagina, and yet we don't really know what it looks like. It's a performative act. And that only started within the past 100 years. And I don't think a lot of women think about why they're doing it, why they're putting so much time and money into it and pain. And when we don't even know what we actually look like. That's at least the thoughts I was having. Same with this little Josephine, also looking at herself. And I love that she's balancing on that little foot on her little toe. And it's also a little mirror in her hand. And yeah, like women looking at themselves. And I'm sorry, Mom, that I'm talking about you so much, but my mom is also still in the audience, and she's wonderful. She's a superwoman. But one thing I noticed with her is that she never took the time to look at herself because she was so damn busy. She'd come back from work, take off her pants, go to sleep, and start the next day. And she just never stopped to look at herself. And that was something I can see happening in a lot of women. And then my precious little sculptor, Elizabeth, who I love so much. And sorry to bring up my mom again, but based off my mom, who, when she was pregnant with me and had a little apartment, and she was single at that time, and she had this little bath that she would sit in, and she would connect with me in her at that point. I thought how beautiful that moment must have been for a woman to have this very unique experience with her body and feeling so close to it. And I just imagined this little bath feeling so warm and cozy inside it and not fitting quite clearly. Little Elizabeth. Well, and then, so around this time, I had the opportunity to move to California for 9 months in this and work full time and indulge in my work once again, which is unfortunately really when you can make a lot of work and work hard is when you get full time in your studio. It's quite challenging to do it otherwise, in my opinion, especially because my work is so very time consuming. But again, as I was saying, it was kind of the beginning of my relationship with my boyfriend. And I was thinking a lot about what do our bodies look like together. So I made this dancers, but brushing our teeth sculpture. Funnily enough, it's a sculpture of brushing your teeth. And it's the only time I've ever had a cavity, because life does things like that to you. When you make a sculpture brushing your teeth, you get your first and only cavity. And then this piece, which changed my life in so many ways, both my career and how it's led me to here now, but also just as a piece, there's something about it that felt very important. That's something I wanted to bring up earlier with when I was showing you my sculptures. When I first got to grad school, I had notebooks. I'm not very good at keeping notes. I like start 300 at a time. I don't have one that I go through. I just write on everything. But on my first page of my first notebook, I wrote, why don't I make a life-size sculpture of a woman? I might just as well go back to the sculpture. Why don't I make a life-size sculpture of a woman sitting in an armchair out of paper mache? And I remember being like, I have no idea how to do that. Hell no. So I continued painting for a year. And then 2 years later, this was my thesis piece. And I didn't remember that I had that thought. And then I went through and I was like, oh my God, I should have made this as soon as I got to grad school. And that's as you guys are in grad school right now, my biggest advice is don't be shy, be wildly bold. And that crazy idea that's in the back of your head that you think, boy, that would be great if I did it, but nah, that's too crazy. My bet is that's the idea you should be doing first. I would go for that. Even if it's a bit scary and you don't do it well the first time, you'll get many chances to do it again. And don't pull a Shona and let it be the last thing you do when it's the first thought you have. Odds are that's what's going to lead you much further than small, shyer ideas, which is what these paintings were. These paintings here were micro versions of that sculpture of woman sitting in a chair. It was all kind of there, but not fully expressed, versus this sculpture really does express so much of what I wanted. And it was just there the whole time. So that's my really big advice about grad school, especially because you have the time and the support to do it. Yeah, so this sculpture of me and my boyfriend Stuart, holding his flaccid penis in my hand, and we're watching TV, and I thought of it as a very sensual moment, not a very sexual moment, just two bodies being together. And I was just so interested in what we would look like, because he's very thin and has abs and never is out of breath, and I am fat, and I don't think my body can make abs. That's not true, and I'm out of breath just thinking about being out of breath. I like another joke, but it's true. We're just very different bodies, and our experiences in our bodies have been so very different. And so seeing us together was both very scary and a bit embarrassing at first, and then wildly relieving. By the end of the sculpture, I couldn't remember why I ever thought it was weird that how we would look together, because I'd spent so much time making us come together. And I hope what the students in the room are seeing from a lot of this is like, you don't have to, I think you want to have these great grand thoughts. You want to make that great piece that is so intellectual, but truly, I think the more interesting things, of course, I make identity-based work, but is what's honest to you. And as you can tell, a lot of these sculptures, really, and all of these pieces I'm making work really closely with how I was thinking about myself. And there was just one way of expressing myself. And I think much more interesting work will come from just being honest than trying to overthink and make things feel real, I don't know, grad school, intellectual, whatever, or artful, I don't know, whatever you're trying to think. Don't get too intellectual. Just let the first thoughts come through, and then you can think about it in a more intellectual way after, which is what I did after the sculpture. Anyway, one thing I did with the sculpture I didn't like was how I set it up. I knew it couldn't just be a bed in the middle of a room. So I made some pillows and I kind of painted the wall. You can't even see, but I painted these really light flowers on the wall. And it just felt like a beginning of an idea of like, how do I populate the spaces around the sculptures? So I started making digital collages of my sculptures and having fun imagining what the world would be around them. That's another thing. I would certainly hope no one calls himself, I mean, you can if you want, but I think it's a wrong move to see yourself as solely a painter or solely a sculptor. You're an artist, and whatever idea you have should be expressed in the medium that it needs to be in. And painting is certainly not the answer to everything. It's a very specific medium that serves a certain role, and it can't be the answer to everything. So I would highly recommend moving in all directions, because there's just so much to learn. Even if it sucks and you hate it and nothing came from it, odds are more will come from it than just doing one medium. And so these digital collages were fast and were funny, and I can be playful with it and colorful. Color has always scared me. I mean, that green floor is terrifying to me. I don't even know how I made that decision, but I did. And it just led me to like, that's my sculpture, Nora. And why would Nora be resting like that? What situation leads to a woman so relaxed. And I thought I liked finding paintings also that kind of replicated the feelings I thought my work had. So above her, you have Lucian Freud's painting, which is one of the first paintings I ever saw of a plus size woman. It was a fat woman, and how important that painting is to me. And I started using myself. There's me on the toilet brushing my teeth, which also then became multiple paintings and a sculpture. Me shaving my legs with a little McLean Thomas in the background. I titled this one "The Moment She Realized She Had Toe Hair," because I feel like once a month, I forget and remember I have toe hair. And I go through the same wave of, oh, I have toe hair. And then I pluck it and then forget. And then a month later, I'm reminded by accidentally looking at my toe and being utterly shocked. I blame the Russian, Scottish roots in me. We're just very cold, hairy people. And I think, anyway, so those digital collages is what really helped me make this life-size installation. So you guys saw that first attempt at that sculpture, which was just the bed, a couple pillows, and a wallpaper. And all these digital collages helped me free myself to feeling comfortable adding whatever I wanted into my piece. I had this incredible professor at grad school, and his name is Dennis Congdon, and he's fantastic. And I was TAing him once, and he was talking about his paintings, and he makes incredible work. And his paintings tend to have pretty natural-ish colors, at least the ones he was showing us. And then suddenly one of them was bright pink. The sky was pink. And I asked him, why was this sky pink? And he answered, because I want to. And I thought, damn, that's wild. Like that's like such, yeah, why wouldn't something be the way you want it to be as an artist? It's your world, you can create it, and you don't have to follow any rules that you don't want to follow, or you can make your own rules. And there was something I learned by that pink sky. He just wanted the sky to be pink. So when it came to suddenly filling up these worlds, I didn't have to explain why I was making the decisions other than it's what it felt right, is what I wanted to do. Nothing will make or break anything, in my opinion. So why not just try? Here's another angle from the top. And this was supposed to be kind of a reinterpretation of my bedroom. It's how my bedroom was set up, but it certainly wasn't half this colorful or patterned. I'm actually kind of shy of using patterns in my own home, which I feel like makes me a fraud, but don't tell anyone. And what I loved about this experience of showing these sculptures is how I witnessed people looking at it. People came in and photographed their favorite moments. Some people preferred the bodies, some people preferred the objects on the table or on the nightstand. Like it just was up to them. And I really enjoy this experience of giving viewers a lot to take in and be their own director or viewer in a way, just like this. Some people prefer this to the bodies, and I thought that was quite exciting. So there's so many. And it led me right after my this installation, I had the privilege of getting my first solo show offer in New York. And that's when I made I finished my first paintings. You guys all saw how I was unable to finish paintings in grad school. Well, the first ones I ever finished started right after this installation, where that was, I really learned, one, the benefit of finishing pieces. Things tend to happen when you finish a piece. And also, my just joy in it and focusing on the woman and making her take up more room and more space in the image, having it more focused on her. But the big difference in my eyes from when I was first doing it is, one, I really don't want to be I didn't want the models to be looking at the viewer or the person painting. I want us to feel like we're almost peeping toms. We're intruding in her moment and in her space, and you're not being invited in. You're just getting to observe. I think that was the big difference from when I was in grad school, where I was so convinced in a powerful moment and a powerful woman is gazing straight at you. But I didn't, as I said, I didn't like how much that was asking you to come in. I don't think I want people in these moments. I want them to feel like they're just theirs, and we happen to be there, lucky enough to see it. And this is when I started my process that I still have now. I start with a specific reference, an art historical reference, a man painting a woman. As I said, history is the porn, art history is the porn of history. So there's a lot of nudes to pick from. I then, in the second image, you can see I posed for it myself and made a digital collage out of it. I then send it to a model, which is the third picture. And I asked this model before sharing, always ask. And then with all the three pictures before that, it turns into the final painting, which is kind of meshing all these ideas together. It's another little joke of mine. It's like art historical telephone, where you just kind of all whisper something and you see how it ends at the end. And I got to paint these beautiful women in these moments that are private, where they're unaware of us viewers, Alina and Asia. All these paintings are titled after the women I painted. That felt very honest to me. Sometimes I have trouble with titles. I feel like they become a good last moment way of adding information to a painting and a twist, which I found like if your work can't do it on its own, a title shouldn't be doing it. So I like the straightforwardness of these names. Alyssa. And this is the solo show where I had all of these sculptures. They're quite big. You can see the painting hanging in the background. I also had more of these little sculptures. There's little Amelia with her ginger hair. I love her so much. And her little belly. Little Stacy lying down. All of these sculptures, these women are also based on women I know. Little Cecilia. This came from a student of mine when I was at grad school. She told me that she had this mole on her butt that she always tried to see. And I just pictured this like very romantic body twist where she is turning around to look at her mole. And I just love this idea of finding the beauty in these very casual moments that we all experience. You guys saw that digital collage that led to this painting. Just showing you more of these. You saw the digital collage that also led to this one. So all of these women are women in my life. They're my best friends and close friends, coworkers. Some are women who reach out to me who want to be painted. But I think so much of what I'm most focused on is one, that they want to be painted, that they're comfortable being painted. They get to choose what they want to wear or not wear, which is really important to me as well. Because I think women have had, even though we make up most of art, we have not up until recently had a lot of control over how we're seen by others. Kaguya, I painted this one right as COVID started. It is my COVID painting. I actually loved it because I spent a whole month on it, even though it's not a very big painting. I've never spent so much time on a painting, and it was, you can tell if you're in person, you can tell how different it is. The skin is much more skin-like. Yeah, indulge. Whenever you get the time to really work something, I would recommend doing it. Same here with my lady Jade. And again, I just like these moments where they seem to be caught in their own imagination. They're lost in their thoughts, and we just happen to be looking at them. I should also say I'm always seeking the next thing to do. I get not a bit bored, but I don't want to do the same thing over and over again. I like the excitement of something new, which is why I have made every possible, I've made sculptures, paintings, prints, fabrics and patterns and watercolors, anything you can think of. I'm excited to try, because doing the same thing over and over again doesn't seem to be how one makes big leaps forward in the career. I don't know if you guys remember, but at the beginning I showed you that outline ink drawing where the woman was looking over their shoulders, and I told you how that was the painting, the drawing, where I was like, I have some work to do. And here is me finally repainting Tess Holiday, but this time I understood so much more of why I was painting and why I wanted to paint. Tess Holiday is a very famous plus size model, and she's one of the first women I ever saw who was plus size and had a relationship and felt comfortable, looked comfortable in her body. And it was revolutionary to me and so important to my development. And I'm so thankful for her and for my ability to paint her. And the how far I've gone from when I first took a picture off her Instagram where she's modeling in underwear to this painting here where it was a full conversation back and forth, and it's her in her actual, like in a living room, and it's her cat, and there's so much more control both on my end and her end. And she's just so damn beautiful. I just can't stop looking at her. And I don't usually care if so much of the paintings look like my models, but this painting, it just perfectly was her without much effort. I think her brain is just ingrained in my head. This painting is so important. Anna, her lying down pregnant in the bed in her bath. She gave birth not long after. She's my first high school friend who's had a baby. As you can tell, so much of my work is about me figuring out womanhood and what it has meant to me and to the women around me. I do feel like I'm a woman who makes work for women, thinking about women, and how they have experienced becoming themselves. I mean, she struggled with her body in very similar ways as I did as a young woman, and to see her here so very comfortable with herself and so at peace. And her husband is the one who took this picture of her, and how intimate that back and forth moment must have been for both of them, and her willingness to share this with me. All of that adds to the painting. And these are all the small decisions you have to think about. You have to think about how you're referencing your images, and what does it mean to paint the people you're painting. Oh, me in the bath are very different than this one to this one. This feels like a more accurate this depiction of how I experience womanhood. My boobs pointing downwards, and my kind of grimy bath, and my tampons. I don't know if any other woman feels this, but I have tampons everywhere in my house. I feel like they just sneak out of the boxes and they sneak on every surface. So having tampons represented feels very true to me. All these beautiful women. I mean, this is when I can even feel how when I'm talking to you, this is why I'm excited to maybe change a little bit what I'm doing right now, which is what I'm thinking. Because a lot of these things are just me reiterating the same idea and pushing it a bit forward. This watercolor was quite important to me because I loved how pink it was. I like how there was a bit of fantasy in it. And it wasn't really a real space, quite clearly. And I just think that's something I want to do a bit more of. I'm not very good at being fantastical or wildly liberated in that way. I have this belief I have to follow rules. Like it has to have the right angle. That light has to hit how light really hits. Light doesn't have to do anything. It's my painting and I can have it function the way I want. And so this painting was really helpful in being free that way. And it can be so hard to be free, which is why my big advice for other students is you set yourself some boundaries at the beginning, because it's very exciting to push back against boundaries. And sometimes it can be really hard when everything is open to you. There's nothing really to push back against. So, if you're not sure what to start with, like after this, I made a whole bunch of pink paintings because why not? I love pink. And it was something I was struggling to work with. And here is this show that Lily recently talked about that took place in Alabama. And what really helped me about this show, which is what led me to my more recent body of work, is seeing all these women in the same space. I'm slowly going through all of these to get to this picture. I'm going to quickly take, my mouth is wildly dry. Seeing this picture of all of my sculptures in the same space, and also thinking about what it means to be around other women. I think a lot of women or people who've had close friends who are women, when we're young and we're in our early 20s, they're such important, critical moments in our lives when we're free to be ourselves. We're developing with these people, we're growing up together. And led me to my current body of work, which was women with other women and what it means to invite people into your space. I now live full-time with my boyfriend. We've been together 6 years about. So I now live with a boy, which is very different than when I lived with a bunch of women. And I don't think I took those moments a bit for granted because they felt eternal until suddenly they're not. And so here are these very funky digital collages I made of myself. I thought they were kind of funny to see me talking to me with my hand on my other leg. But trying to figure out how space would be created and how women talk to exist together. My girlfriends would sit on my lap as I would rest my head on their shoulder. There was such a comfort with our bodies with one another. We would get changed in front of one another. There was all these fears that existed outside of my friendships didn't seem to exist when we were together as roommates or hanging out. Here's me and my friend Vicky, who end up being the actual person painted in the painting that you'll see later on. Me and me having a very important conversation. Lesson I learned from this digital collage is I did not translate very well into a painting. And that's my other advice for students is one thing I miss now being a full-time painter who I have a lot of shows I have to work for and I'm always on a deadline of some sort. As I don't get to mess up anymore and I don't get to hate a painting and not show it. And I think it's so important to make mistakes and to make bad paintings. I'm sure you've all heard it 1,000 times, but boy, is it true. Like follow through with your bad paintings and finish them because you won't always get to do that. And so much is learned from what you don't like. You don't only learn from what you do like, you learn from both. And I learned so much from hating this painting. From how the bodies took up. I literally the day before my opening of my solo show, I woke up and I had a dream that hyperallergic wrote an article canceling me, which is so insane. No one cares about me that much. It's just bananas, but that's how viscerally I hated this painting that I was convinced that everyone would see it. And this was just last year. This painting was shown in the beginning of this year. But I'm also so thankful for it because I recreated that painting recently and it's so much better. And I only could have happened if I really disliked that first one. So this is the first painting in that body of work of women with other women and who they invite into their space. Elise, who's the one with a striped t-shirt, she is actually a high school friend of my boyfriend who reached out to me and wanted to be painted. And I thought that was so exciting. And then I asked her, who do you want to be painted with? And so she got to pick this woman that I'd never met, Leia, who is her brother's husband, her husband's brother's wife, something like that. But she got to pick who she was represented with. And I thought that was very exciting to create. And also for me, I didn't know what these women are going to look like. So there was a bit of excitement there of like a surprise, who am I going to paint? Here is me and my mom. She's in the audience somewhere, Moira. I haven't seen my mom since September 2019. COVID has separated us big time. She's in France. And I'm in Philadelphia. And so having this moment where we kind of faked our intimacy and faked being together was really important. I had her act out this scene with my brother. The reference picture is my brother sitting down in her arms. And then I modeled it here and I collaged it together and I was able to fabricate this real moment because it's really in front of us, but it also wasn't real because we haven't touched this way in so long. But I love it so much. And when I showed it to my gallerist, Clara, her first thought is it looked like I was imagining my mother and I was just sleeping there. And I just love that so much, how it just comes through for every person. We all have different relations with people. I don't know. I don't know if you can tell, but I love my mom. And so this was a very important painting to me. Another one where these three women touching each other. And I love these slight moments with the head on the shoulder and these very delicate moments of intimacy and these very delicate moments of sharing space and yourself with someone, which feels so real to having friends and being with women. I feel like we all know that there's not a lot of depictions of women engaging with other women if it's not because they're talking about men. That's how women are usually seen. So what does it mean when women are together just to be together and not because they're discussing who they're dating, but they're just three very good friends? And this painting certainly did that for me. Ha, Lily, who is the beautiful, incredible woman who introduced me. This is actually one of the only paintings in recent times where it's someone who sent me a picture. I sent out a prompt about a year ago saying, if you ever take pictures of yourself and you in your private moments and you want to share them, please do. And completely by surprise, Lily, a year later, sent me this picture, and she wasn't sure what to do with it herself. And it just blew my mind. It's so beautiful. And Lily's so beautiful, but it's so real and it's so vulnerable. And I added that cat and that extra hand looking. I like that you're Lily. I like that you're making eye contact with that cat. But I mean, this was one of the favorite paintings of the show because I think we all know how that feels. Everyone loves your underwear, Lily. They loved your hair up. It all felt so real to being a woman. And I think that's a much more beautiful depiction of womanhood than most women I've seen in my life, or most depictions of that. Here is a bit of size reference. You saw that. That's one of the digital collages I showed you, where it was me and my friend Vicky. That was a 92-inch painting, my biggest painting yet. Mistake I made. It was the first painting I made for my solo show. I should have made it the last. Sometimes don't. Remember how I gave you that advice, do the big idea in the back of your head. Sometimes you have to build up to it. I also learned that lesson. Oh, there's the cat, there's Bo. And then this is a very quick digital collage I made when I got the offer for Art Omi, which is a space in upstate New York, where they asked me to make an installation, and a life-size installation, just like that first one I showed you. And it led to this. I just like that back and forth because I had no idea how this was going to actually look when I made this digital collage. So how cool that I actually made it. Sometimes it baffles me because it all happens so fast when it's happening. I was making this installation at the same time as I was making all the paintings I just showed you of women together, all in the span of like 9 months. I would not recommend it. It did help me forget that COVID was happening because I had no time to think about anything else. But these are three women in the living room all hanging out together. They don't really look like me, but it's me and my two best friends from high school. I'm the one standing up, and Tanais and Allison are the ones sitting down. And I lived with one of them for 2 years. And just like the hot mess of a space when it's just you and you're comfortable and you could not wear pants and it's not sexualized, it's just your body and you're messy. I don't know, all these moments that are so true to all of us, especially me. And again, these slight touches, the hands were all kind of touching. I was also thinking of the three graces when I did this. I have a 3 grace lamp that's in my bedroom 24/7. I'm about to finish the presentation. I don't know if I'm, and then this. This is my favorite picture of the show in the background. It's by far the most prestigious. It was very fancy to have a show there, and it felt really cool. I mean, that's why I love this picture, because it was so much work and it's condensed into this little stage that was in this huge room. And I love that people had to walk around it. I love that my favorite interactions were when kids walked in and asked questions like, why do they have these snacks? If they're so messy, why are they using coasters? That was a question that a young girl asked, which I thought was a great question. And I love that that's what these little objects do. And they're just as important as the people. And I think if I hadn't gone through all the stages I showed you, which was them first making the sculptures without anything around them, then making the digital collages and painting them, with every one of these steps, I learned so much about the importance of each part and being generous to the viewer. That's something that matters to me, is I want people to see my work in person and get a lot out of it. And these sculptures certainly help doing that. There you go. I have much more. I've made many more paintings and all that since I've made this sculpture, but I feel like this was a good finale to my talk. I have no idea how long I was talking, so a bit long. I'm sorry about that. Okay.
All right. Thank you so much, Shauna. That was, I mean, lovely. That was just lovely. And so nice to hear all the different avenues you've taken. So now we're going to take this time to enter our question and answer portion of the lecture. So if you would like to take this time and put your questions into the chat box, I will be reading them out to Shauna and she will be answering them. So I'm going to jump to our first question. And while I'm doing this, please take that time to ask any questions you might have. All right, Shauna, this is from Jill. And she says, thank you for your amazing presentation. I'm super curious about your paper mache figure sculptures. How did you end up making them the way you do materially? Was there trial and error? And lastly, how do you store them? Is there a room where they all live together somewhere?
So the first, my summer before RISD, I was convinced I have a bit of a imposter syndrome. I have quite the imposter syndrome. So I genuinely had this, oh, someone had the audacity of walking in front of my door. I'm so sorry. Lily, no. Sorry about that. I was home before RISD and I was convinced they sent the acceptance to the wrong Shona McAndrew, which is insane, but I somehow believed it. And I was so anxious. I needed to make something before I went home, and I wasn't home in Paris, and I had to make something that fit in a suitcase. And I saw this YouTube video of a woman making a paper mache sculpture of her French bulldog and with balloons, paper, and glue. And I was like, damn, that's just up my experience with sculpture. So I made this teeny tiny sculpture of a little lady out of paper mache, and she sat in my studio my first year of grad school, and during crits that people would walk up past my sculptures, past my paintings to that little sculpture and be like, wow, it's so great. And I was like, no, my work's actually this. And they just cared so much more for my sculptures. And that was helping me understand that sculptures can be anything you want, not just made out of, I didn't know what sculptures are made out of, but I didn't think they were made out of paper mache. And so I just carry that through. I have lucky to have a boyfriend who is a sculptor and he welds. So he has a welding room downstairs. So now my sculptures all have like stick figure welded frames inside. But when it was just me, I would use wood. And as for storage, yes, I have a storage not far from my home and they all live together cramped in one space, which both makes me happy and sad because I spend a lot of time with these ladies and they become somewhat real to me. And so I feel sad when they're locked in a room together, but they just had a very exciting year. They went around the country and were 2 shows, so they can chill a bit. But yes, I do get to pay for storage for the rest of my life. But I'm happy to do it.
Thank you. Our next question is from Warren, and he says, why do you feel that you did everything wrong in your first paintings and drawings?
Because I've only ever painted women. Even as a kid, all my drawings were of women, and so I knew that, but I didn't understand perhaps why I was painting women. But I did understand that it wasn't how I wanted to look at it. Look at women, and it's not the kind of image I wanted to create. And so that's how it felt just wrong to me. And, that whole thing I talked about, the confrontation, like I was a bit naive in my understanding of what it meant to be a strong woman. Like you don't have to confront in specific ways to be strong. There's nuances to that, which I think I've discovered throughout time. But at first, it was big, bold, staring right up to the camera, and it just didn't feel right to me. And I didn't know how to finish them. Everything about it felt like a task, and it didn't feel very true to me. And now, my work is damn tedious, and I can spend days mildly annoyed as I'm painting the same mark 400 times in a row. But I understand so much more my mission and why I'm doing what I'm doing. So it just feels more right. I'm a true believer in intuition and instinct. You got to work on it, because at the end of the day, it's kind of all you got when you're alone in your studio. And so you have to train it a little bit. You have to listen to it, right or wrong, and learn to get better at working with your gut reaction. And my gut was telling me it just wasn't right. And I'm happy I trusted it, because I still doesn't feel entirely right now. I think there's much more I need to work on and push through. I hope that 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 30 years from now, I look back to what I'm doing now and see it as naive and, oh, it's so much more growing to do. I really can't wait for those moments. But I'm able to do that now about my 5 years ago when I was, and as a woman, I was not very comfortable with myself. You know, I shared with you, those were really the first pictures I ever took of myself naked, which funnily enough, because I'm cursed, my father picked, my name is Shona because my father's initials are Samuel Herbert Okoshkin, SHO. And at midnight in a studio delusion, I took pictures of myself on my computer and was sending them onto my phone to edit them. And in midnight madness, I sent them to my father because I typed SHO and it sent it to him. And I sat down and an hour or half an hour later, I'm like, I don't remember what I clicked. And I checked my sent and I sent them to my father. So my first ever nude pictures I took of myself, I sent to my father. Thank God he is the most distracted person in the world. And if I hadn't emailed him saying, don't look at it, he wouldn't have even noticed. And he's mainly a nudist, so nudity is no big deal, but boy, was that a traumatic first naked experience. So since those first paintings you saw, I, as a person, I've changed so much and I've grown so much. And I think I needed that for my work. You're laughing at the sending it to my dad. It's traumatic. It's so unfortunate.
Just because I relate, not, I didn't do that specifically, but I'm known to send things to the wrong people.
Oh, well then, oh my
at
God.
wrong times. But anyway, continuing. Sophia says, hello, hi, Shauna. I was wondering if you could talk about your relationship with paper as material. As a sculptor myself that casts in paper, I'm constantly getting asked about the femininity of paper as a material. And thank you for your presentation. It was lovely to see the progress of your work.
So just, I want to make sure I answer that question. The femininity as paper is what?
Yeah, she put that in quotations. I guess people in the past have referenced the material of paper being more feminine than, say, another material to be used for sculpture.
Interesting. That's not a critique I've had per se, but I do know that a lot of the work I've done has been seen as crafty, and that's very much associated with women in a negative way, though I think now women are certainly taking that back. I mean, first of all, screw those people. Who cares? If it's the medium one and use feminine, you know, you don't have to actually answer every question that's asked about you, and you don't have to figure everything out all the time. But I mean, I love that paper, especially when I'm making watercolors. I have to be more considerate and slow, and I have to think about my marks so much more because it's watercolor. And so I love that paper makes me have to slow down and think things through, which is maybe a more womanly trait. So I will say with pride, that's why, but I mean, people are so silly to ask these questions sometimes, only because it makes you overthink, like, why did I make that decision? Am I limiting myself? I don't know. Paper is a wonderful material, and I love it the most. I think I'm most comfortable when I watercolor. I think a lot of how I paint now with acrylic on canvas is a lot how I paint on paper. I've learned so much from it. So be proud of it being feminine, because it's darn amazing being a woman. And if it's womanly to do it, then it's probably the right thing. Oh, here's my Lily. Lily, want to say hi?
Thank you. Well, we still have time, so if anybody has any questions, please take this time to write them in. And in the meantime, I actually have a question about your sculpture, since no, that's a question yet. After you make the paper mache, do you prime the surface with anything? Do you use like gesso? Do you sand it down? Like what's your process of making it ready to accept paint?
It's just the most time consuming. It's dozens of layers of paper mache that I sand down immensely until it's very smooth. And then I treat it a lot like it's a dimensional canvas. I gesso it, and I wet sand the gesso until it's flat. And then I paint with acrylic and seal it as if it were a painting. So I really, I mean, I feel like I'm sculpting with paint or sculpting with color. I am, as much as I said, you see yourself as an artist, not just a painter. At heart, I'm a painter for sure. It's what I love the most. I love color. I love the illusion that paint allows you to have. That sculpture sometimes can be a bit more literal. But yeah, they're just sculpted paintings.
Nice. So when you say you seal them, what do you seal your acrylic?
Oh, some like
paintings?
matte mediums, or I'm looking at it now. I'm a Golden probably should sponsor me, but they're like matte polymer mediums are wonderful, and they're gloss. I have a lot of fun when I make the little sculptures. Yeah, what's on the table there? I have so much fun. Like the cans are super glossy, and then the food is super matte, and you get to add such a fun layer to the work I'm making.
How
Yeah.
much time did it take you to finish that entire installation?
It's the first time I've ever had a studio assistant. I had a student of mine when I was at RISD, and she was here for 3 days a week, which is a lot. Sorry, I'm just seeing something. It's not important. She was here 3 days a week, which was amazing. But if it had just been me by myself, probably a year and a half. But due to me being a young artist and thinking I should say yes to everything, I had my painting, this solo show a month after my painting solo show, which is insanity. I would never recommend that because the thing I hate the most is saying that's good enough. I think I feel like I failed myself as an artist when I'm working on something and say that's good enough. I hate that feeling. And sometimes when you have deadlines, you have to say that's good enough. And I wish I never have to say that again. And working these two sculptures, the sculpture and painting show at once, forced me to say that quite often. But yeah, a year and a half would have been just by myself, but 7 months with the help of an assistant.
Nice. Well, here's one more question coming in from Marley, and she says, "Hi, Shauna. How heavy are your sculptures? Is it a pain to ship them? Also, do you thrift your props or buy them new? Thank you so much for your fabulous presentation."
Well, when I was unrepresented, I had to ship them myself. I shipped the toothbrushes, and that was the most traumatic experience of my life. It was horrible. It was so scary and expensive, and my sculpture arrived with a huge dent in the arm, which I cleverly put a Band-Aid over because they're human and it looked like they just had a cut, but if it wasn't for the Band-Aid, there would have been a dent in the arm. So that was really scary because they're quite big, and some of them can be light, but a lot of them get heavy because I used paper clay to sculpt a lot of the small details, the fingers and the hands and the belly rolls. To get those crisp lines, I use paper clay, and that can get heavy fast. Now, I mean, there's so much privilege to having representation just because you have a whole team helping you. But now I've had people come pick them up, but even them, they get damaged en route. They're hard to move because they're awkward shapes. But they're paper mache, so they're very hard to break. They don't break, but they can be a bit of a bummer to move around. Yes, I would not recommend if you don't. It's a risk to make these because they can end up being stuck in your studio forever because there's no real way of getting them out. As for the props, I mean, a lot of it is made, like the table's made and all the paints and all the little objects, but the couch and the armchair and a lot of the bigger objects. That first installation I showed you with me lying in bed with my boyfriend, not a single person cared that I didn't make the bed. And the sculpture of the woman twirling her pubic hair in an armchair, I did make the armchair, and no one cared that I made the armchair. So I realized that like if I made them or didn't make them, no one really noticed, and that's not why they're there for it. As long as I'm touching it and I'm adding something to it, that's what matters. So that's kind of how I see things. So that pattern, the armchair in this picture, I painted the pattern on it, and I'll repaint the wood or I'll add to it. That bookshelf in the back that's purple, you can't see in this picture, but I painted it purple and sanded it down and then painted wood grain all over it. So this picture, you can't see it, but it took a lot of work to paint that wood grain. So yeah, either I make them from scratch, or I take something that's already existing and just change it up a little bit. But I also think you can use a prop that's not whatever works for your world. Again, there's no rule to my practice that's going to be 100% true for your practice because your practice isn't my practice, and I've made my own rules. So If I wanted to use something completely untouched and put it in my sculpture show, I could do it if I wanted to. No one would tell me otherwise. And they would be wrong to tell me otherwise because it's my thought process and I'm, doing what's right for my work in that moment. So if you ever feel like you just want to use a prop, use a prop. And if you want to make it, make it. Either or, they're right. It's the right decision. Sorry, she's being such a baby right now, which is awesome. I would recommend getting a dog if you don't have one.
All right, well, I guess that concludes our lecture. Thank you so much, Shauna. This was,
Oh, my pleasure.
I'm going to stop the recording now.
Okay, well, thank you.